Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 22nd Budget Committee meeting. Uh, First on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, as far as roll call, all members are here with the exception of Danielle, who is excused this evening. She's not feeling well. So at this time at 6:30, I'd like to open public forum. If anyone has any comments or would like to say anything, now's the time. Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment at 6:30. And we'll move on to new business. And first is financial report from the school, the quarterly. I don't know if anyone has any questions or if Jana or someone would like to just give a brief overview of it.
I know we're all focused on budget, so
Yes.
It's the same format that you've seen before. We break it out into a quick analysis of our expenditures, followed by a discussion of our revenues. This particular one, at the end, I have another section where I kind of laid out some future things to look at as we go through the year because it's the first quarter. So in brief, the expenditures kind of still being impacted a little bit by COVID. We have our food service fund has had a shift in our model this year, so that's going to look different as we go through the year. We are now outsourcing to a food service management company both schools. Last year we only did the junior senior high, so we had some of our own internal staff. When I say that we have outsourced, I want to make clear to everybody that the individuals that work for us, of the 5 that worked in the program, 3 are now working still in our program just for the outsourced management, and one of the other individuals retired. So we didn't replace or get rid of our people. We tried to work with them to make the model work. So as we move through this year, you're going to see some differences in shifts in revenues as well due to food service. The expiration of the waiver, the USDA waiver, allow us to feed kids for free, all kids, have resulted in the fact that we're back to the free and reduced model, which means that many of the families that were getting meals for the last year and a half are now going to have to apply, and unless they qualify, they'll be paying for their meals. We won't be able to provide them. So what happens with that change is that we expect an increase in local revenues as we sell food to students, but we also expect a corresponding and probably greater decrease in federal revenues as the money that we've been receiving for reimbursable meals drops quite a bit. So, as we go through the year, we monitor this. It's very early in the year, but we did this for you in October, so we'd only had a month of operations. It's not going to tell a whole lot yet, but as we continue in the year, you'll see more. We had applied for some supplemental grants that I wanted to make everyone aware of. Underneath the category of the SAFE grant, we had 4 projects that were submitted. Since this report has come out, 2 of those projects we have been awarded under the early decision model, and we are in the process of working on those. We have 2 more projects that are still pending. We hoped to hear, they told us in November, but we're quickly running, so I'm thinking that might be a little later. But we're optimistic that we will benefit from those grants as well. To avoid providing too much information about the nature of the improvements, specifically we are looking at making improvements to our security system. We are looking to partner with our police department to get a live scan fingerprinting machine to facilitate the background checks, and then there's some impact resistant window film that we'll be applying in different places in the building. So the window film projects are the ones that we have had approved. The other 2 are still pending. Um, as far as the federal revenues, we still are using a lot of ESSER funding to support different things in our school in a programmatic way. One of the ways that we have been able to kind of enhance the use of our ESSER funds is that we have been approved to use it to help us with our elementary school playground renovation, which is really exciting news. The PTA has worked really hard to fundraise. The taxpayers in town have voted 3 years in a row to set aside $50,000 for that purpose, and this will round out the funding needed, we think, to do the project. So that is really exciting. We're working with TACT right now, and they're drawing up plans. We have a committee together that's gone out to playgrounds and looked at different equipment to see what we might be able to do. And we are really moving full steam ahead on that. So I hope by the close of the Q2 financials, I'll have some much better information for you about that. FEMA project, as you recall, last year we were able to recoup about $386,000 of unanticipated revenues under a FEMA project to reimburse us for sanitation services and some sanitation equipment and supplies. Some of the reimbursement that we'd been expecting last year due to timing differences did not come in that cycle. So we're expecting about $120,000 to come as unanticipated revenue in this cycle. We are unable to expend that money as such because it's a reimbursement. So it will just go into our general fund, and at the end of the year will be part of what gets returned. I did a little bit about the tax rate, and we'll talk. I kind of want to hold off on that because we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the budget. This was written pre setting of tax rate and things. So if it's okay, we can talk questions later. And as a follow-up to one of the questions, and I believe it was Mr. Caddy had asked about the Education Freedom Act, I've given a little synopsis about how that actually impacted us this year. At the time the question was asked, we didn't have those figures yet. The Newmarket School District will be losing just under $10,000 in adequacy aid due to that program that they're directly able to relate to the program. There's a phase-out period where we're reimbursed partially in stages for that for about 3 years for students that withdraw, but it's very difficult to project because it basically is parental choice. So if a parent decides, we don't get a lot of notice that that's happening. So we don't have a lot of predictive information about that, but we are able to tell you as we go through what the impact is. And then again, I'm thinking as far as the education tax, I think I'll hold off to talk about it with the budget because it directly impacts the tax rate part. So that's kind of the high level. I've attached the financial statement pieces with the explanations of variances up and down for expenditures and revenues. And I guess I'll open it up to you folks to see if any of you have any specific questions about those Q1 financials. No? Okay.
Looks good.
All right, great. Thank you.
Janet. Okay. Next on the agenda was a discussion on the school CIP request, but due to the fact that we don't have a whole lot of information on it, we're going to pass that off until potentially the next meeting for the budget committee, if everybody's okay with that. So now we get to the discussion on the school proposed budget. Superintendent Allen?
Thank you. Thank you. I did want to just start out by just saying how impressed I've been. I was at the CIP committee, how carefully they review capital projects in the community, and obviously, as I've said, I really value as many eyes as we can possibly have on things to make sure that we're making the best decisions for our community. So I thank you for your work in this, and I think it's a really valuable work that you do. So with that being said, I hope everybody has a copy of the budget narrative that we sent out, because Janet and I are going to kind of tag team it. So we're going to go through it piece by piece. What I'll do is after each section, I'll stop, and if you have any specific questions about a particular section of the report, I can give you the opportunity to ask those questions. I also, there were some questions to us ahead of time, and I have those. We will answer those at the end. So if you submitted those beforehand, know that that's on my list of things to talk about once we go through the entire report. Okay? So with that, I'm going to start. I actually am going to start on page 7 of the report, because I feel like I want to just boil it right down. If you jump to page 7 of the narrative, you will see that there is the FY24 general fund proposed budget. And in the lower right-hand corner of that chart, you see 3.9% is circled. And so one of the things I want to emphasize here in all of this is everything that we're going to talk about here tonight is covered under that 3.9%. Okay, so everything that is in the budget is within the 3.9% increase that is in this proposed budget. And obviously we'll explain a lot more, but I wanted to kind of draw your attention to that initially, because sometimes just cutting to the chase helps us to get there. So just a little bit about our budget process here. I mean, I think it's important to realize that we are in the process of coming out of a pandemic paradigm for how we run schools. As you can imagine, over the last 3 years, there's been a lot of what we would call anomalies in the way that we have budgeted things, the way we raise money, the revenues that we've had coming in, our enrollment numbers. There's a lot of things that are just we go back to the answer as well, the pandemic had an impact here, either through funding, through expenditures, whatever. And so as we began this process, one of the things that we were really trying to do was to return to as much normalcy as we possibly could create. So we're really trying to build this budget around the idea of returning to normalcy. And in order to do that, we actually, I had Jana run about 7 years worth of budget data for us to all have as we were discussing things. And I think one of the things that I did, particularly as a first-year superintendent, I had a lot to learn. So I sat with every department head, and we went through every budget line by line, discussed what was included in the line, if there was something unusual about it, a significant increase or decrease, we talked about it. And so we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that in the end, wherever we could identify things that were anomalous requests that had been made in the past, they didn't roll forward, that we made sure that what ended up in the budget was based upon our needs for the 23-24 school year and based upon what returning to that normal model would entail. So at the front end, we did establish goals. One of the things, working with the leadership team and the board, we identified a 4% increase as being the goal. So trying to get in under 4% was really our goal. Keep in mind that with inflation running at October number was 7.7%, but when I wrote this report, the previous number of September was over 8%, and it had been running pretty consistently there. Economists do predict the inflation, I'm sorry to say, I'm sure you all know this, to continue pretty much through 2023 and into 24. So inflation is a real factor. So to try to have a 4% increase in that climate when energy costs are going through the roof, benefit costs are going through they're all much more than that. So setting that goal of 4%, we saw that as a flat budget, is trying to get in as close to a flat as we could, and 4% was how we saw that. Beyond that, we also wanted to make sure that we provided support for all the ongoing school improvement efforts. One of the challenges here in Newmarket has been there's been a lot of leadership change and disruption in recent years, and the last thing people needed was a bunch of new initiatives being rolled out and trying to take the district in an immediately different direction. So we wanted to make sure that the things that people have been working on for the last few years were valued, and that funding to continue to support those things were there. So that was goal number 2. Component that we spent some time looking at was hiring and retaining good staff. One of the challenges that Newmarket has faced, and frankly schools across the country and region are facing, is getting employees in all of the positions that they need. Even as I speak to you today, where how many pairs down? 12. we're still 12 paraprofessionals down from where we would like to be. So there is a challenge in trying to get people and to keep them. And so one of the things that we engaged in early on was having a salary study done to kind of take a look at particularly our non-union people in particular, to make sure that the wages and salaries we were offering were appropriate and that they would help us to attract and keep good people long term. So that was a goal that we had included. And then lastly, only because it's fourth on my list, but it's certainly first and foremost in everybody's mind, to be a responsible stewards of Newmarket's money. Clearly we don't want to request anything that is not going to be needed, and it's not going to have an immediate potential benefit on students. So that was kind of where we began. Give me a second to get to page 2. That leads us to one of the analyses that we needed to do in order to kind of begin to think about staffing, was to take a look at enrollments. And one of the things I did include on page 3 of the report, this is data from NESDEC. NESDEC is a nonprofit organization. They do enrollment and other types of studies for school districts all over the Northeast. And they have actually been doing enrollment projections for Newmarket for quite some time. I mean, certainly if you look at where we are currently at, this current year we have 970 students pre-K through grade 12 enrolled. Certainly if you look at the highest point in the data that I've provided you back in 2020, that is a decline. Next year's projection is projected to drop a little bit more. I do think, and it's one of the questions that was submitted, but I'll just touch upon it a little bit now. There is across New Hampshire, across the region, a general decline in public school students. There's no question about it. In the last 3 years, public schools in New Hampshire have actually dropped 5.8% of their enrollment. So it's not just a Newmarket trend, it's an everybody trend. And the other component I think is valuable to keep in mind is during the pandemic, a lot of different decisions about the education of their children, and one of the things that you'll see is there's been an increase in families choosing to homeschool. So that's a factor, and certainly there have been a couple of charter schools that have been launched during the pandemic. One very recently, the Coastal Waters over in Exeter, which is largely an environmental program. And certainly those kind of opportunities are now out there that weren't there before, so there are people making different choices. But definitely we have to be cognizant as we kind of move forward with our planning that enrollment is on the decline and has been on the decline for really the last decade. And it's likely that those numbers are not going to bounce back to the levels they were 20 years ago. So as we move forward, we have to keep that in mind as we plan for what the schools need. So that brings us to our staffing plan. And so if you turn to page 5 of the report, gave you a broad summary of, this is the entire district, every position, every department. If you go to the bottom of the page, you can see the summary number. Overall, this reflects a reduction by 7.35 FTEs, or a total of 3.6% of staffing. To be more specific about what we have opted to reduce, as I indicated, we have been to hire paraprofessionals for many years. In fact, going back 6 years, we have never been able to get to the level we need. In fact, we've been 6 paraprofessionals down every year for the last 5 years. So we decided to make some decisions about funding and staffing. Since we haven't been able to fill them for 5 years and we functioned, let's just pull those 5 positions out. So we did do that. Additionally, we have 2 positions at the elementary school based on attrition and retirement that are and the logic of the numbers being what they are. So we've been able to reduce by 2 FTEs at the elementary school. And within that, we've also then taken advantage of an opportunity to increase our special education staffing there, because with a reduced number of paraprofessionals, that means that many fewer adults to work with kids, and so having an additional case manager actually was seen as very beneficial. But in the end, you'll see we reduced across the district, we reduced staffing by 3.6%. A lot of that also reflects some of the great work that Jana and her team have done around some of the contracted services. She'll talk about that in a little bit, around the food service program, the facilities programs, and that kind of thing. So some rational to basically taking into account the changes in staffing that those changes have brought into play. So then going on to page 6, I'm just going to give you a kind of quick overview of, this is an analysis that has been done for the last few years. Basically what we're trying to do is to, when we say the 3.9%, what we're trying to give you an idea of what does that mean, where has there been, what is new in this budget, and what is a continuation. If you look at that little chart at the top that says total increase, decrease in the first column, and then it has new and then level. Just to quickly talk to you about this budget. I mean, basically there are 3 areas of our budget that really drive things: salaries, benefits, and then operations. So as we tried to summarize for you where the changes are coming from, if you look at salaries, you can see in the middle column where it says new, $288,628, that reflects the reduction of all the positions I was just telling you about. So we've reduced by that much. If you look at the column preceding it where it shows a $319,980 increase, the reason that there's an increase is we had to account for the fact that the teacher's contract, which was voted last year but was not in the budget, is now in this budget. So there's an increase of $608,609 that's reflected there. So by reducing by $288,000, to incorporate the contract, we actually had to increase salaries by $319,000. Does that make sense? So, and then in benefits, clearly when you reduce staff, you also have a commensurate gain in reductions in benefits, which that's reflected there. But again, overall, benefits, I'd love to tell you that they're going down, but they're not. I think the number was what, 11?
The ultimate, we budgeted at 9.5. It wound up being like 11.
Yeah, so that's included in that number. And then obviously the operating costs, what you're seeing there is the new is the shifting over of those contracted services. And so so that leads us to the operating increase of $540,127. So in that first column, $980,203, that's the actual dollars of increase last year's budget to this year's budget, which is 3.9%. The last column, which says level, that is, to give you an idea, had we not made any adjustments and we had just brought forward everything, it would have been an increase of $1,086,064. Okay? So that kind of gives you, and that chart at the bottom kind of goes through some of the individual items are in there that are new. So then if you flip again back to page 7, I've already brought that to your attention, but basically bottom line, the proposed budget we're bringing forward is a 3.9% increase. If you look at the pie chart at the bottom, that gives you sort of a breakdown of where things fall. 46% is salaries, 21% is benefits. So roughly 2/3 is salaries and benefits for employees, 25% is operational cost, and then 8% or $2,098,978 is the debt service on the bond, which thank you Newmarket community for that, because we have 2 great schools as a result of that. But that is your budget. So I'm going to stop here. Are there any questions on anything I've said so far?
So it works out to about $27,000 a student. I'm just curious if that's a number you guys look at, and is there any comparison of that number to other school districts? Or is that like not applicable?
Well, it's,
And the other thing I'll say
go
is,
ahead.
I mean, because it declined in the amount of students, it actually went up more than your budget per student.
Well, one of the things to keep in mind, I wish it were as simple as like a ratio, that you can say one student down, you reduce by X number of dollars, but a lot of your programs have to function regardless of the number that they are, particularly when you get into some of the specialized services that we provide. So those are not necessarily costs that are directly connected to just your student enrollment. So that's one piece to keep in mind. I think the other component is particularly, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about the different proposed changes at the different levels. When you get up into the secondary level, certifications are challenging to manage. And I do think, so for example, if you're going to offer a chemistry class, you have to have a chemistry certified teacher. You can't have a general science teacher teach it. So there are a lot more limitations in terms of staffing when you get up into the secondary level because of this more specialized nature of certifications. So if you're going to offer some of these high-end course programs, even if the numbers are lower, and in Newmarket we have a lower enrollment, that's just a variable you have to contain. Does it concern me that we have, if you do by the way, that's not how the state calculates per pupil. I understand what you're doing. You're taking the total budget and just these students, boom, 27,000. And you're not wrong. That math is correct. But that is not how the state calculates, because obviously they pull out all of the costs like transportation and so forth that are not included. So it would be a different number at the state level. That being said, there's no question that we need to get very serious about looking at our program moving forward. And we need to make decisions about what we want for our schools and make adjustments. Because as I talked initially about COVID anomalies, I mean, certainly the drop in enrollment, we can't ignore that. We've had about a 10% drop in enrollment in the last 3 years, and that does have to play an impact. Now the question is, if you do it as a strict math problem and you say, okay, let's commensurately reduce by the same percentage, you then run the risk of decimating programs that are important for individual students to have. And if I happen to be the senior that's about to have AP Calculus and that goes out the window and I lose AP Calculus, it doesn't change the fact that's a negative to that student. So moving forward, we definitely have to have a mindset of reviewing every position as we go forward. One of the things that Principal Corman is in the process of doing is every year where we take a look at the program of studies and what's being offered, how many courses are being offered, and making decisions about what is needed to be run in order to meet student need and demand. And some of it is going to involve consolidating of things and making some different decisions. And as I told the board, moving forward, we know in the coming year there are going to be positions that are going to come open because of natural reasons, attrition, that kind of stuff. And our strategy is going to be with every single position that comes open, we're going to ask the question, is this position needed as currently constituted? If the answer is yes, then we fill it. If it's not, we're going to ask the question, is there another need we have that we could use this as an opportunity to fill that need? And if the answer is no to that, then the position does not need to be filled, and you start to work your way in a direction that gradually moves the program in that way. But quick,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I guess I poorly phrased the question. Well, I guess the nature was, do we benchmark ourselves against other school systems just to kind of see where we stand in terms of overall cost?
Have I done that for this? No, I have not. But I do think that's a good point. I mean, certainly, if you go to the state website, there is a great, I don't know if you have seen it, the iReady website that the state, and it does do a lot of comparisons. The cost per pupil comparison it's just an enormous range. So it comes down to what's the program you want to run and what's the cost that you're willing to incur to run that program.
Thanks.
Can I just ask a quick question on,
Sure.
On the enrollment for the elementary school? So that's, from that high water mark, 2020, that's kind of a significant drop, right, to 27 people. Is that something you guys are concerned about, like that trend at the lower levels continues, how it
Well,
works its way up? Or?
one of the things that is interesting, when NESDEC did its enrollment study, they look at live births in the community during that time. And what's interesting is The birth rate in Newmarket has been roughly consistent during the window that we're seeing the decline. So that the kids are out there. They just haven't yet shown up in the kindergarten class. In fact, one of the things you'll notice at the front end of the enrollment, if you look at kindergarten, in 2020 there were 86 kindergartners. The next year we dropped to 63. 22 we bounced back up to 84. The next year we dropped to 67. So it's very difficult to project what's happening there. Certainly, if the trend continues with that kind of decline, there's no question that limitations on staffing and other things. And I guess I would hesitate to say I'm concerned about it. I just think we have to right-size our staff as we go and make the best decisions we can to provide the program our kids need.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, any other questions? Mr. Keaton?
Yeah, I'm going to ask a number of questions about your cost basis. So
Sure.
forth. But I want to precede it by saying that Newmarket needs and deserves really good schools. And the best thing we can do to raise the value of properties in town is to have really good schools.
I would agree with
And
that.
the taxes will go up, but the values will go up a lot faster than the taxes. And we need to remember that. But I'm concerned that you're going to have trouble. I commend you at a 4% budget, 3.9% budget submittal. I think that's, I'm surprised you can do it, actually. But my concern is over future time, what's going to happen? Two things to me are converging. One is in '24, are we going to have to add what are currently ESSER funded positions in order to maintain the same programs we have? And secondly, at some point, your magician in residence, Jana, may find it difficult to continue to make improvements on the non-education side of the ledger. And since the costs have gone up, by my calculation, over the past 4 years, 9% per year on average, on a cost per student basis. At some point, are we going to be in a position that we are not sustainable to have the quality of programs we have within a reasonable increase? 4% is good, but I don't know how you're going to do it for next year or the year after.
Well, you've raised a number of really good points. I mean, certainly there is, you mentioned the ESSER funding, and certainly one of the challenges when you use windfalls, if you will, of grants to fund as a social worker, when the funding for that runs out, you have to make the decision, is this something we're going to absorb locally, or is it just a position that we're just going to let go when the grant ends? So we do have some decisions to make, and we definitely are aware that right now we're talking about 23, 24, but 24, 25 may be more challenging just because ESSER money, we have to use that by 24, and that may present its set of challenges. So absolutely, we are going to have to take a look at that. One thing which I will talk about again later, but I think it's really important. At the junior senior high, we just went through the NEASC accreditation process, and in that process, the idea is to really take a look at your whole program. And since we have our grades 6 to 12 under one roof, we were really taking a look at our grades 6 to 12 program. And one of the things that is recommended to us as we move forward to improve us as a school is we need to have some commonly held community values around what do we want of the Newmarket schools and what do we want our students to have achieved by the time they leave us. One of the things you're going to hear a lot about, which initially is not a cost item, but eventually will result in either restructuring or potential cost items down. But you'll hear Andy and I and other administrators in the district talk about the vision of a graduate. And one of the concepts that the NEASC really touts highly is the idea of developing a commonly held community definition, including the transferable skills you want your students to have achieved by the time they exit your program, as a way to define what are the things you want your kids to have experienced. And when you start with the idea of developing consensus around what we want, then you take that vision and you give it to our various educational leaders and say, okay, let's evaluate where we are at, and let's take a look at how do we need to retool our program in order to meet our students' needs. And certainly we can't ignore enrollment declines. We can't ignore that. But by the same token, we want to make sure our students are engaged and excited in the learning process. And certainly one of the things that I would acknowledge, as I had my secretary looking into this today just to get me the exact numbers, but there are 70 kids that currently live in Newmarket that don't go to the Newmarket public schools for various reasons. 50 of them are homeschooled, 14 of them are going to charter schools, and 6 are going to private schools. And certainly that's 70 kids out there that are making decisions about what we have in this school and making decisions about, is this the place that's going to meet my child's needs? And I think the more we can find that kind of common ground on what we want the experience to be, that will drive those conversations. And yes, they're hard discussions to have, but we have to have them. And in the end, will I be able to come here next year and say 3.9 again? I don't know, but we're certainly going to try.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You want to talk revenues?
So I have the unenviable task of talking to you about the revenues. We have, as Mr. Caddy pointed out, we worked very hard on the expenditure side of the house. A couple things that Mr. Allen didn't mention, but that I wanted to cast a shout out to my team, is we contacted many of our trusted vendors, our partners, that we spend a lot of operational money with, and we were able to get 7 of them who are a significant portion of our operations facilities budget to agree to hold their rates at 22-23 rates for us. So that was one way that we really looked at doing that. The other thing is we partner with the town on energy. We use a consultant to help electrical, propane, and oil. And this past year was, as we all saw, energy prices were up and down, and it was mostly going up and at a really rapid rate. And I'm happy, it was a little bit of a nail biter, but we wound up locking in our electrical rates for a 2-year fixed rate. Not at the rate that I wanted, but it sure is better than what we have out there now. So by doing some of those types of remediation things on the expenditure side, if revenues remained, this would be a much different picture. The issue that we're up against on the revenue side is, even though we've held those expenditures down, we've had some things that very non-typical things that have happened on the revenue side. And as you know, when we talk tax rate, there are several components that go into that. One is expenditures, but the other is what is your offsetting revenues. That tells you how much you have to raise and appropriate locally. So I hope you got it. We also included a tax impact estimate document along with the budget. Did you guys get that document? And I tried to make a very convoluted and vague concept a little bit more concrete for everybody. So to estimate tax impact, that we make a lot of really early decisions and we make a lot of assumptions, most of which in truth and reality don't hold because we make them so far in advance. So when we make a tax impact estimate, we're assuming that every single dollar of the appropriation is spent, and that never happens. If we get there, then I'm not doing my job for you. We also assume that revenues come in precisely as we've estimated. That doesn't always happen. Student counts remain static, they go up and down, that no changes are made to the state adequacy funding. model, and that has not also been true this year. So overall, it's really quite implausible that in any given year all of those things hold, but yet we have to make our best assumption for you a year in advance to say what could the tax impact be. So while the estimate I'm going to give you I feel is very conservative, it is mathematically calculated in accordance with the Department of Revenue, and it looks very high compared to what we've seen on other warrants. We calculated it out at $3.07. But I want to offer you one piece of information that I think is really important to understand. Last year, we calculated that our warrant was going to have a total impact of $2.16. The actual impact on the school side was 18 cents. So when you look at that 307, you kind of have to understand that's 2 years of a normal tax increase in 1 year. And there are many reasons, and I talked a little bit about them in my quarterly report, and I'll kind of go over them again today, for why this year was so strange. But a large part of it had to do with the state making some changes, one, to the adequacy aid formula in a one-time fashion, which means it's just impacting 22-23 and not any place else. It also has to do with the New Hampshire retirement. They legislated that they were going to give us a one-time breather on teacher retirement for 7.5%. And then overall, our adequacy aid has dropped by over $200,000, or approximately $200,000. So when you add those impacts together, even if we didn't spend a dime over what we spent last year, the taxpayers in town automatically are looking at about an $895,000 difference in what we would have gotten for revenue in 24 and 23, 24, and what we're predicting that we're going to get. So, and it has nothing to do with our budget. It has nothing to do with our expenditures or not containing costs. It has to do with the fact that the state has, I think the intention was to provide temporary relief for taxation, but and I have been speaking to this committee as well as to the board since those came out last year, saying, you know, we are expecting this, but just understand that the impact is if it's not legislatively adopted going forward, it looks like a lowering of taxes in 1 year and then an automatic increase in the next year because you're artificially lowering the rate. So as we kind of look at the revenues as they come in, you know, we have the one-time shift that the state made with adequacy aid. We have two components of our adequacy aid. One is called the statewide education property tax. That's what is raised from taxation locally. The other component of that is the net education grant, which comes from other sources like lottery, cigarette tax, tobacco tax, different places that aren't raised and appropriated locally. So on this third page of the document I shared with you about the analysis, if you look at the top chart on the adequacy aid, the blue bar, it's a blue and orange bar, the blue is good. The blue means that's taxation that's coming from elsewhere in the state, coming to Newmarket. We're not basing it off tax rate. So if you look at fiscal year 23, we had over $3 million that came in from state sources not related to tax, and only $1.4 million that we had to raise from that here in town from that swept. But now look at fiscal year 24. Look how short the blue bar is. The state is only giving us $2.3 million in state revenues. And guess what? We have to make up the difference locally in our local taxation. That's why the orange bar is higher. And then when you look at the two bars, even just looking at the two bars together, you can see that there's a step down in the total adequacy aid formula from 1 year to the next. So those factors combined, while we did have some tax relief in this year, and you can see it from the trend if you look at those blue bars. If you were to kind of draw a line from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 24, the trajectory should be a downward trend, but there you have fiscal year 23 that's actually up. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about in those numbers. And overall, down at the bottom, the last graph kind of shows you that we're down last year. The total adequacy aid for those two components, both SWEPT and net education grant, were $4.4 million, and In fiscal year '24, it's estimated to be 4,200,000, so we're down about 200,000. So when we look at the revenues and the revenue, and we talk about the tax impact, you can kind of see, and I forget the page number it's on, mine isn't numbered, but it's the page that shows the budget and the revenues. When you look up at the very top line, it has district assessment of 20,769,508. That's the amount, the maximum amount that we're estimating would need to be raised and appropriated locally. And it's important to understand that that also includes the swept tax, which is technically a state tax, but not including it isn't, I don't feel, is transparent. We've always presented it to you as a piece that's raised and appropriated locally, because it is based on your property taxes, and people do feel it as we go through that. So, you know, just in summary, our local revenues are relatively stable. We have a decrease, but it's purely due to the, we're expecting revenues from the closing out of our bond fund, and that will not repeat because that's a one-time thing, so that's why that's a little bit different. The state revenues I've kind of addressed, the deduction in the net education grant and the increase in SWEPT. We're expecting a little less in special education aid. That's again another state revenue that we don't have a whole lot over. And then in other state aid, that number 132,000 that you see that we're looking at coming down, that's that one-time New Hampshire retirement contribution of $127,000 that we had the benefit of in this tax year when they set it. But next year, unless they memorialize that with legislation, that won't be repeated. So you can kind of see how those things are playing out. I'm anticipating a little bit of an increase in child nutrition revenue because the rates per meal have gone up a little bit, and we're working really hard to increase participation in our programs. We implemented a breakfast after the bell program, which allows students an opportunity to take a breakfast after the initial breakfast service before school in their classrooms, so they can sign up for it. Snacks get delivered to their classroom, and they can, or breakfast, I should say. So for some of those kids that just come squeaking in and don't make it in early enough, they have a second crack at getting breakfast. And I have talked to our food service director. It has made a difference. We've increased participation by over 60% in our breakfast program. So we're hoping that will play out on the revenue side as well. So I've thrown a lot at you folks again. Is there any question about the revenues and how it plays into the tax impact?
The only thing I'm gonna ask is, when you're referencing a table, just tell us what page it's on. A lot of
Yes.
people have been flipping back here, trying
Oh.
to find the page that you're talking about. I
Okay.
believe we found it, but when Todd was speaking, he told us specifically what page to go to. That helped us speed up the process so we could get our heads into what you're talking about.
Sure.
so
I'll have to
next
borrow
time,
his
help-
because
help
for
with
some
that,
reason I
please.
have one with no page numbers on it, but I will underneath all that. But I will do that from now on. It's a good point. Thank you. Any other questions for
I
me?
may have missed some of that based on what Chris had said. I'm on the page now though, but the other state aid and revenues,
Yep.
141,448 in 22-23, and down to 9,000 again, which is apparently looks like it's about right, average, right?
Yeah, the 9,000 is average. The
What-
the difference was that one-time New Hampshire retirement contribution
the
for the
re- that's
teachers.
where the retirement
Yep, that's where that
contribution- got it.
7.5% is hiding in here.
Got it.
Yep. Anything else? All right, well, I'll turn it back over to Todd. I know. I think this one's mine.
That's you, Tom. Okay. So the next section I want to get into starts on page 11. It's the elementary school proposal on page 11. Just to kind of give you some highlights. What I hope you're going to hear as we go through the different schools is there is some commonality of what we're trying to accomplish. One of the things we're trying to do is to think like a system and develop processes that work for everybody. So you'll hear a lot about reviewing programs and developing multi-tiered systems of support across the board. So at the elementary level, there are really three things that are being focused on academically. One is the continued implementation of the Bridges Math program that was adopted last year. With the implementation of any new program, it's a multi-year process. There's professional development that continues, and work to align curricula across the district. So there's time, energy, resources that continue to be allocated there. Second thing that the elementary program is really focused on is to do a literacy program review. It's been a while since the K-5 reading literacy program has been evaluated. And generally speaking, you want to review programs every 5 years, not because you change, but because you want to ask yourself, is this the best way to do it? And make sure you're providing the best quality instruction. And at the elementary level, we realize it's time for that. So there's a process going on to review K-5 literacy, and clearly there's money allocated in the budget on the assumption that at some point we'll have resource needs associated with whatever program or decision is made of that. And then the third thing, which is very much a system-wide thing, is multi-tiered systems of support. Particularly coming out of the pandemic, you probably have heard a lot of people talking about how are we filling the gaps and helping students that are struggling coming out of the pandemic. And the multi-tiered system of support is where that comes up. It's a system that is geared towards looking at student data and making decisions about what students need based upon student information. And it's also takes a look at student social, emotional, mental health well-being as well, and making sure we're providing for those. So this is a process that's an ongoing effort that our teachers are engaged in. In fact, you probably have heard about the Wednesday model. We have the early release on every Wednesday for professional development, and there's a lot of time being spent taking a look at student data and asking ourselves, how can we best support our students? So those are the things that I think you'll see people spending the lion's share of their time and energy on this year. When we start to look at staffing, I kind of already summarized this for you in the district-wide description, but certainly there are 2 FTEs, teachers at the elementary level based on attrition and retirement that are being removed from the budget. 3 paraprofessionals at the elementary school have been removed because we haven't been able to fill them, plus we've functioned without them, so we feel confident that we can continue to function without them. And then we've added 1 case manager for special education. If you look at the enrollments, one of the things I want to bring to your attention is some of the numbers in this chart are different than the numbers you saw in the NESDEC report, so I want to just kind of elaborate on that. One of the challenges when you are looking at students locally is, I use the technical term, butts in seats. There's actual students that are physically in our classrooms already here, and making sure we're ready to service those kids. And then you have projections that are coming to you that are more from a mathematical model. The mathematical model, while is helpful in long-range thinking, you also have to ask yourself, we have, like in this case, we have 80, this year we have 82, and those first graders are going to be second graders next year. So while it may drop 1 or 2 students, the actual number right now is 82. So as we started discussing staffing models for next year, we actually used the actual bodies, students who are currently in our schools, moved them up and asked ourselves, what would we need to make sure to provide for those students? So for next year's staffing model, we've taken that into account. The reason we did that is because, again, there are actual people in our schools right now, and we feel it's more realistic when it comes to making sure we are appropriately staffed. So if you look at the elementary school, you'll see for this year we have 29 FTEs. For 24, we're proposing 28. Remember, as I explained to you, we are adding a case manager, but there are 2 classroom teachers reduced in that number. But you can see the class sizes generally range from Pre-K I'll talk about as a separate model, but you can see from kindergarten through 5th grade, the numbers range from 16 to 19 and a half, which are on the lower end, but they are given that one of the things we're discovering is that students' academic needs, particularly coming out of the pandemic, can be more intensive. Keeping numbers a little bit lower is not a bad thing to give teachers that flexibility to work with them. So that's the staffing model for the and again, if you flip to page 13, you'll see the same breakdown that I gave you for the whole staff. It just simply is playing it out at the elementary level. So that's page 13. And ultimately, if you jump to the financial chart on page 14, you'll see overall the budget for the elementary school is going down by 0.3%. So with all of those changes and meeting all of those needs that I just described, the elementary school has a 0.3% reduction. Any questions about the elementary school? Okay. With that, then I'll move on to the junior high. And actually, I want to, go ahead.
Can I just ask one? So the tuition is, and I don't understand this, so I apologize, but this is kids from Newmarket going somewhere else, right? And we're paying.
These are students that are assigned, they're students with special learning needs that have been assigned through an IEP process to an out-of-district placement as the least restrictive environment for them. So they're not students that are attending private school in.
So it's special needs.
It's special needs, yeah.
So when we look at the high school, I'll just ask it now. I mean, there's a huge increase in trend of this cost. It's a big cost. It's $147,000. So overall, we're seeing that increase. Is there anything unusual on that?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is as students age, they move up a level, and a big chunk of the increase at the high school level actually shows up as a reduction at the middle school because we have a student who has a more costly out-of-district placement, so it's being absorbed at the high school level, but it's showing a commensurate reduction at the elementary level. Across the board, though, yeah, you are correct that the cost of out-of-district placements has gone up. In fact, if we jump ahead, hold on.
Yeah, I didn't want to kind of.
Yeah, 144,000 district-wide.
Yeah, and so it goes down in junior high. That's just shifting.
Yeah, but it is generally true that the cost of out-of-district placements in general, even on a one-to-one basis, is more expensive than, so that trend is going up.
And I would imagine we don't have a lot of control over that cost.
Really, it really varies depending on what the need is that's resulting in the out-of-district placement. I mean, certainly there are some learning needs that the need is so specialized that there really aren't any, so that the place that we're sending them to would be a monopoly and we just have to pay whatever the cost is at that location. It is no question, we'll talk about it a little bit, but there's also state aid that comes into play with regards to some of that, which we'll talk about.
Thanks.
So going on to the junior high, I want to start by saying one of the things you're going to hear me do, because when I say junior high, I have to kind of stop and pause for a second, because the concept of junior high is really sort of an old model of instruction for kids in that adolescent years, the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, as we would call it here at Newmarket. The vast majority of schools across America have shifted to what's called a middle school model. And how that is different is the structure of the school is different. And one of the things that is happening at the junior high, and we may at some point try to convince the community we want to call ourselves a middle school, is to take a look at the structures to make sure that they are age appropriate and supportive of student learning needs. One of the things that's a great benefit of having the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the junior, senior high is they have access to resources and supports that oftentimes kids of that age group don't have. But one of the negatives is we have historically attached the experience of the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to the master schedule that drives the high school, and the program that is best for a may not be the program that is best for an 11-year-old. And so one of the things we're working to do is to establish a distinctly separate model to give us that flexibility to be more student-centered, trying to capitalize on a team structure which already exists. We already have a 6th grade team, a 7th grade team, and an 8th grade team, but to really give them the freedom to create program at that level that allows them to integrate their learning, that allows them to have more control of the structure of their day to be better in line with what the kids need. So that's one of the things that's happening at the junior high / middle school level. In addition to that, they are also equally invested in the MTSS process, the multi-tiered system of support. So you will see that they're doing a lot of data analysis and so forth. And as I said, trying to kind of create a structure of a school that is more like a school within a school. You have a middle school model that is not part of the high school. It's its own distinct identity where kids who are in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade feel an identity to their program and are not, for lack of a better term, sort of lost in the big picture of a much larger environment. Looking at enrollments again, you'll see, for the most part, the numbers are quite healthy there. You'll see in the, for 2000, projecting 76 kids in 6th grade, 67 in 7th grade, and 81 in 8th grade. You know, and you can see the 19, 16.75, and 20 and a quarter is the averages of those 3 levels. We also have unified arts that are offered to middle school kids, and so for all the unified arts classes that are run with our middle school / junior high students, it's about an 18.5 staffing level. So kind of looking at staffing, if you jump ahead to page 17, you'll see the breakdown that we have seen in the, with the other the district model in the elementary. And you can see all told there's about a 1.08 reduction of staffing at the middle school level. For the most part, that is accounting for the facilities tech change that we have made that's removing those from that model. And if you jump to page 18, you'll see that the overall budget for the junior high, middle school portion of the program is showing a reduction of 0.4%. Questions about the junior high?
Could I just point out that in each one of these, you pulled out the facilities and consolidated it, which increases the budget by like $300,000. So it's not really apples to apples, each one of these, in terms of whether it's increased or not. I mean, I'm not being critical of
Right,
it, it's just,
I hear you, yeah.
it's not an apples to apples.
Right, yeah, I mean, we're in a point of trying to account for it, so with future analyses, it will become a static thing. You're right, you're right.
So I'd just like to ask you on your, on the STEAM program, and then you're talking about here further on, you're talking about the need for additional software budgets and things of that nature. Tell me about the content of the STEAM program.
Well, it's a program that's actually being invented as we speak. Actually, Andy's here. Would you be interested in coming and just talk a little about the STEAM program? Andy's a better person to answer this question.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Corman. I'm the principal of the junior senior high. Thanks for having us here tonight. So specifically to STEAM, just as a structural thing, every day students participate in STEAM for about 50 minutes. So every single middle schooler all day, every day from about 12:15 to 1 o'clock is doing some type of STEAM opportunity. They are back on their teams, and what they have is a group, a teacher with, I don't know, 15, 18 students, and they're working on a wide range of activities, and a lot of it is student-driven. So we've, bear with me here, Maverick came out over the summer. Everyone got really interested in aerospace all over again. We have a whole bunch of kids exploring aerospace every day. We have a whole bunch of combination of, I was in a computer programming course where they were designing kind of a modified Roomba. Instead of it just vacuuming your floors, can I program something to do a project for me? The kid was trying to figure out if he could get out of feeding the dog, to be honest with you. Can I get this thing to go over and pick up the dog food and bring it back to a location? Those are the types of things, just off the top of my head, to give you some hardcore pragmatic examples of that time being used. Kids absolutely love it. It's an opportunity for a staff member and a student to interact in a non-traditional way. Just because you're my English teacher doesn't mean we're doing English all the time. that particular example of the Maverick, the aerospace thing, is an English teacher who really has a passion for aerospace and aerospace design. Career is obviously an educator and primarily in the liberal arts, but has this side hobby of aerospace. And the ability for a student to see an educator in a completely new realm was something that kids and staff were just so appreciative of. And what happens is about every 45 days, because we're on a quarter system, the students rotate to a new teacher. So if I'm not an aerospace kid, but I'm with you right now, that's great, but in 45 days, maybe I'm going to that computer programming class, or maybe I'm going to an art class that's more artistic and mathematical. We had students exploring the evolution of Marvel Comics as how it impacted and how it changed the art of how people used to draw comics, something I knew absolutely nothing about and got a full-on 5-minute education from a 6th grader on the evolution of art and design, and I was blown away. Those are just some examples of things that happened during STEAM. It is a really valuable time in the student's day for kids who don't always love the traditional educational pathway. It's an opportunity to try something different and try something new and do it with maybe a different familiar face. So to kind of beat the dead horse with the analogy of the English teacher, I really don't like reading and writing, but I really like the fact that we have aerospace, and maybe when I see you tomorrow and you ask me to write that essay, we have a better personal connection, because I still don't like to read and write, but I know you're a good person and I'm going to trust you a little bit more, because we talked about airplanes yesterday and how things really get off the launch pad. And SpaceX launched just the other day, and I know UNH had some stuff on the rocket, and I know teachers today were talking about it during STEAM, because kids came to middle school lunch, or excuse me, were leaving middle school lunch excited to talk about New Hampshire dirt going into space. And to hear an 11-year-old talk about that was kind of mind-blowing to me. And that's the result of some of the STEAM work we're doing.
Graphic noveling
Yeah.
is very much the future for a lot of education for kids. My daughter's a graphic novelist, so that's sort of like Fast and Furious. The other thing I want you to consider, I'm not sure if you guys you knew this or not, but the McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center, they're just opening up a new planetarium. It's now one of only 3 in North America with a 10K projection system. Blow your mind. Blow your mind. You guys need to
I
put it
sense
on your
perhaps a
schedule.
field trip request coming, Superintendent Allen. Maybe interested in taking a visit.
Yeah,
Sounds
you
sounds
need to put it on your schedule for your kids,
Absolutely.
because it's really amazing.
Thank you. That's
Really
that's
amazing.
awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions about the junior high, middle school? Okay, and in that case, I will jump to the high school. So at the high school, as I told you, one of the big things that has just occurred is the NEASC accreditation visit, and we have a whole a list of recommendations that the school is going to be working on. Andy has a bunch of committees around all of these different things, evaluating different elements of our program. You will be hearing, as I mentioned before, the Vision of a Graduate conversation. That's going to be being in January to kind of engage the community in a conversation about what do we want for our Newmarket graduates. I know some people might take it as, well, we've done this visioning type thing before, but I have to tell you there's no better way to figure out what you need to do to move your school forward than to get community conversation around what the experience has been for their kid and what they'd like to see it be. And engaging in that conversation so we can then really chart a course for our schools over the coming years. I mean, one of the things that strikes me about Newmarket is we're a very small school system, so that comes with some limitations, but it also comes with the ability to retool very quickly and to make real meaningful changes fairly quickly. And I think that conversation, I think, is critical to that, is community understanding, investment, and support of whatever decisions come of that. So that will be coming to you, and I would invite you all, when it happens, you'll be getting invitations in January for an event in January to kind of start this process. So that's a big thing that's happening at the high school. Again, they're also engaged in the same topics that the district has. MTSS, they're using their Wednesdays for that work. There's also a lot of discussion at the high school level around understanding by design, UBD, curriculum development. Element of the NEASC accreditation is the recommendation that we do a more comprehensive job of articulating our curriculum so that we, it's really a tool to share knowledge and information, and so that's work that is happening. A lot of really good progress going on. Our teachers have been actually training with UBD for a couple of years now, so it's really starting to gain momentum, and we're hopeful that we'll really be able to understand what our program can do and do a better job of meeting student needs based on that. Kind of jumping ahead to enrollment, as you can see, this year we have 271. It's interesting, one of the things that I find very unique about enrollments here in Newmarket, we seem to have an up year and a down year, and it kind of does this fairly consistently. Last year's senior class, I think there were 71 kids. This year's senior class is only 57. So there's, you know, it is in a small system that happens. But this year, 271, assuming, as I said, using the butts in seats model that I described to you earlier, we would have 291 kids. NESDEC is projecting 276. I'm assuming they're calculating in the possibility of kids choosing other alternatives when they reach high school. That has not, by the way, been a pattern that's happening in large numbers here in Newmarket. Currently, there are 6 total students in Newmarket that are attending private schools, so it doesn't seem to be a trend that kids are choosing, but it is happening. When you kind of boil it down, jumping to the staffing plan on page 21, again, same type of analysis here. The reductions that we had were in paraprofessionals, and we did have one. We have one paraprofessional and then one regular ed paraeducator. Again, these are positions that we haven't been able to fill. Nobody is losing a job, but we are simply finally saying it's been 5 years, we haven't filled them, we've functioned, we don't need these positions moving forward. And again, as we've noted, the facilities adjustment factors in there. Overall, a reduction of 3.34 total building personnel at the high school level. If you jump to page 22, you'll see the bottom line number of an increase of 6.7% at the high school level. I would acknowledge one of the questions that came up earlier about the tuition increases, and yes, that's 147,500 of it is that tuition increase. By the way, the tuition in that line also includes tuition we pay to the Career Technical Center, SST. We have 69 students that attend SST for various programs, and so somewhere around 200,000 of that total tuition dollars is SST programming. And I would point out, I was just telling, or Andy was just telling me, analysis of our SST participation rates, and during the pandemic the numbers dropped pretty substantially, but now that we're coming out, more and more kids are choosing to be at SST, which is wonderful because it's a great program and they're getting, you know, all kinds of great opportunities to do, you know, pre-engineering and welding and all those kind of things, but there's a cost associated with it because there's a tuition factor there, so that will obviously in the coming years go up as we accommodate that. And the other place where you'll see significant increase in the high school is in the professional staff, and again, that is largely a function of the new teacher contract and everybody moving up a step and all of that. So that's the high school program. Any questions that you have for that? Then I will move right into the student services component. So if you jump to page 23, 24, we have kind of an analysis of our student services. We've actually talked about this quite a bit already. District-wide, we have students that we're servicing anywhere from ages 3 to 21. So we have students in the pre-K programs that we're servicing. And we also have students that stay connected to our schools until 21 when they age out of the system, because we are able to provide programming for them that helps them make that transition to a so we have a total of 187 students district-wide that are being serviced by our special education program. Staffing-wise, we currently have 17 case managers across the district. 3 of those are funded by grants. So on average, we have about 11 students per case manager, and you can see at the top of page 24 there's a little chart there that gives you an idea of what that plays out at each grade level. Something to keep in mind, particularly at the middle and high school level, there's a lot more of a co-teaching model with our special educators. They're working side by side with a classroom teacher to help plan and implement a program to make it more accessible to all kids, so there's less of a need to pull kids out of classrooms to provide support. So the idea is to provide the services as best you can in the classroom environment. Again, we've already kind of talked about this overall. We do have one increase of one FTE case manager at the elementary school, and all of the staffing changes that we've had to make boil down to about $120,000 increase there. As we mentioned, the tuition is up about $144,000, and then the services we provide. One of the things to understand, charter schools are public schools that families can choose to enroll. But if their child has a special need, it's still our district that's responsible for providing for that. So there's cost associated with it. So even though we have 14 kids in charter schools, some of them are identified students that require services, and so we are working to provide those. And so there's a cost of about $13,000 associated with that for next year.
Is the 18% number, is that the 18% number, is that typical these days?
You know, it varies. I mean, certainly the district that I came from, we were typically 16, 17%. In talking with Erica, I think in past years the number was smaller. I do think there has been a tendency coming out of the pandemic to be more inclined to seek services for students that maybe pre-pandemic might not have been eligible. So I think there's a small element of that. But 18% is a little high, but not significantly so. Keep in mind, by the way, when it's 18%, and Erica, correct me if I'm misinterpreting the number here, at the pre-K program, you need to understand that our pre-K program is primarily a special education program. So 50% of the students in that program have identified learning needs. And so proportionally, it might, so if we took that number out, I would be willing to bet probably system-wide. You took them out? Okay.
So for the 18%, I do remove all of the preschool age kids because we don't have a reg ed offset to see what that actual percentage would be, so I remove those students. But really what it is a function of, our numbers, if you look at the historical numbers, we've had some dips, ups and down, but in special education, we're around the same number, but our general enrollment has declined. And so then when you set the average, it goes up when we have fewer regular education students to offset the number. So that's really where that number comes from. But historically, we have been in like the 16% range. And really, it's been through the pandemic where we've seen that increase. Students' needs have gone up. We've had, at the elementary school, a huge number of requests from both teachers and families to get additional services for their students who have been struggling over the past few years.
Thank you for correcting me, so forget everything I said. Okay, and then the last piece of the student services, just to acknowledge the ESOL program. We have currently 18 students that are are not English speakers as a first language, and they require support services. So there is a ESOL program that we run and support those students so that they have to be successful. So any questions about student services? The next page is a pretty quick one. I'm just going to, the general administration budget, that really is just legal services and HR stuff. So it's pretty straightforward. It's the things that that I and the school board use to do our work. Yeah.
So there's an $82,000 increase in professional services. Could you explain?
Yes. We are proposing an HR consultant to assist us with many of the HR functions that we have in the district. One of the things that we is a struggle in a small system. For example, if we have like a harassment complaint or something like that, you want to have an entity that can do it, can help us navigate that and take the complaint and investigate and do that kind of thing. So that's one component. They're also working with us to streamline our contract system So and that was a significant component there. And then the third piece is completely escaping me. What's the other component to the HR?
The salary.
Okay, salary study, yes, the salary study, in developing that. And actually a professional handbook as well that covers all of the issues for our employees. So that's that, but that's only half of that. The other half?
Legal.
Yeah, the other half is, legal.
Both in there.
So I would have assumed you used third-party resources to do that sort of stuff prior? In other words, you still needed to do some of that before hiring somebody,
Correct.
but I don't see that here somewhere.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's an $82,000 increase. It's like 10% of the overall whole increase, so it's a big difference. If we were going from third-party outside services to hiring somebody inside, we would have seen those costs somewhere else, and now we're hiring somebody. That's what we're doing, hiring somebody, right?
Right, we're hiring a consultant.
Hiring a consultant.
Yep.
And so those weren't services that we've used the last couple of years or needed to use.
Correct.
Okay,
So it is new. Yep.
thanks.
Yeah, and 50,000 of it is legal services. So the vast majority, so about 35,000 of that is the HR consultant. The rest of that is legal services.
You have a policy on when you, just thinking about your human resource consulting, you're talking about having them 1 day a week, so you're talking about 20% of a full-time individual. Do you have a policy as to when you pursue changing from a consultant level, from a consultancy into a full-time employee?
I wouldn't say we have a policy, but I think we need to assess the effectiveness and usefulness of the consultant and determine if it's making us more efficient. And at some point, I would like to think we wouldn't need them to help us make our systems more efficient. Things like getting contracts consistently done. We issue a lot of contracts for staff of various things and making sure those are consistently done. There's just a number of systems we'd like to get brought into play. And certainly in time, we will continuously assess whether it's needed, and when it's not needed, we wouldn't be moving forward with it anymore. Any other questions on that? And I will, the last section I'll talk about, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jana to kind of close out with operations. The other instructional services section, this is largely from Patty Wands, our Director of Curriculum Instruction, and she's just kind of running through all of the various things that we are working on. Again, I've touched upon many of them over the course of this, the UBD work, the math program, the literacy program, the use of a universal assessment, which I'll talk about again at the end, questions that were submitted, the MTSS system, and then the use of all the digital learning platforms that we've incorporated. One of the blessings of the pandemic was we became a one-to-one school system with lots of technology available to us, but then obviously now that we have it, we want to make sure that we're maintaining it and it's continuing to provide for the benefits that we have, so that's in there. And then the other component of her work is mentoring new staff as they come on board. Again, this work doesn't really, the other instructional services budget really doesn't reflect everything that is outlined there. You'll see much of this into the building budgets. So any of the curriculum stuff, you'll see it in the building level budgets. But overall, the other instructional services, which is a district level thing, is going down by 7.6%. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jana, who's going to talk about business and operations, which starts on page 29.
I went and renumbered the pages while you were talking, so I hope I'm on the right, I hope I've handwritten them the correct way. So on page 29 is business and operations budget. That's the area that my team works really hard in. We have the payroll and the accounting and the business function. It's also food service, it's transportation, facilities. So we have, we're the backside of the house, so to speak. In business and finance, that's basically just the business office and the operations. The primary driver of an increase of 25,000 has to do with salaries. Some adjustments were made based on, we had some, we call it breakage, a new person that came in at a different level than somebody else, and we also made an adjustment as part of our salary scale to one member of the team. So, transportation is the next section. That has a very small increase, a 3.7% increase, which is pretty incredible when you consider how high gas has been. We locked that in with an RFP that we're going to be 23, 24 will be the third year of that agreement, but that covers our regular transportation. The biggest areas of shift in the operations side have been in food service and in facilities. I know that I've spoken to you before. We struggled in those particular areas with staffing for several years. We tried a bunch of different options. We tried to hire, we tried to offer incentives, we've tried a bunch of different things, and what it came down to is we found the need in both departments that we would have attrition and we wouldn't be able to fill. So with food service, we managed to run one school with our own staff last year and outsource the second, but there was a key retirement of our food service director that happened in June, and we were just not able to quickly and staff up in order to meet the full model. So we wound up using our food service management company that we used at the high school for the elementary school. As part of our closing financial statement in fiscal year 22, I just want to remind you that because of those USDA revenues that came in for the waivers, we did end the year for the first time in many years with a positive food service balance of I shouldn't even quote it, but I think it's about $130,000. That money cannot be, by law, cannot be returned to offset taxes, but it is retained in the food service department. So if we do have a year where we run a deficit, where our expenditures outweigh our revenues in food service, which is frankly what I'm expecting this year, we will be able to use that balance to offset rather than taking it in. So that we might be able to get a couple years of a little bit of a relief there. The primary drivers in food service, just like everything else, when we go to the grocery store, it's food, it's labor, and it's benefits. And even though we're outsourcing that to a management company, they've seen the same increases that we see across the board in those types of things. So overall, it's an increase of $19,000, which is a 4.7% increase. And if you'll notice on page 30, in the proposed budget, you'll see a whole bunch of lines in the staff and the benefits that don't have any dollar amounts. They're zeros, and basically the only thing that we've budgeted for is we've got some equipment, the professional services, which is the outsourced food service, and some repairs and maintenance that we need to make to our kitchen equipment. So those three things have kind of been offset by our salaries. District-wide facilities. Keep in mind that as was pointed out earlier, the staffing for facilities used to be accounted for in the various buildings. We've shifted to a new model where we are outsourcing our custodial services, and we have trained up our existing staff to become what we're really proud to call facilities technicians. We trained in various areas. They all are being trained and know how to operate the building automation system. They are being trained on basic plumbing and electrical in conjunction with some of those valued vendors that I talked about. We have one gentleman who is going around with our HVAC preventative maintenance contractor. This is the last year of that contract with them, and he extended it one more year, but he's going around with him and watching how to change filters and do basic equipment on all of the equipment that we have so that he can document that, and so that as we go forward with our next RFP, we're hoping that we can pull those services out of the RFP and do them ourselves at a much lower cost in-house. We're also doing the same thing on the plumbing side. We have auto flushing toilets as part of the renovation, and they all operate with a battery. And when the battery goes dead, you have to take the back of the flusher apart to fix it. And in the past, we had outsourced all of those to a plumber. We're now training up our internal staff so that some of those repairs, apart from a catastrophic failure of the valve, can be replaced in-house with our existing staff, and we're cross-training. We're doing a lot of painting in-house now. We're doing a lot of drywall repair in-house now, things that we formerly didn't have the trained staff to do that service, we're trying to pull those in. So while I don't think we have some cost savings this year that we're already seeing, I'm really hoping that over the next couple years, we're gonna see even more cost savings as we bring more and more things in with our staff. We have a great group of people that work on our facilities team. And Mr. Riley does a fantastic job managing both the contract and the staff, and we've provided a much higher level of customer service this year to our teachers and students. We view his philosophy, and I hope I get it right, is that if you're Pepsi-Cola and something prevents you from putting Pepsi in bottles, it's a catastrophe. So here we're a school. Anything that prevents putting knowledge in minds, it's a catastrophe. So he looks at it as that's what we do. We don't want our teachers or other people to worry about what happens in the school, so we quietly go around behind the scenes and make that happen. So he does a great job. Utilities costs, not surprisingly, they're going up, but as I mentioned earlier, we've locked in a fixed rate for our electric, which is much better than the current rates right now. We have one more year of that, and we can even do a hedge going out one more year, meaning that if it looks like the rates are going to drop, we could take the remaining year of our contract, turn it into a 2-year contract, rates from that third year to offset. So we have a little bit of flexibility as we look out, keeping an eye on the futures and all of that with the utilities. And as you noticed, poor Mr. Riley's budget is up by 168.9%, but that's 100%, well, pretty much 100% due to bringing all the staff in and calling them district staff now rather than keeping them in those different cost centers. The professional services that we talked about with the outsourced services are in the buildings for the maintenance and the custodial. And then technology and information, Mr. Carey put together this budget. I think he's written up basically one of the pieces that we have found a need for coming into this next budget cycle. We have a 0.35 summer intern that for the last 2 years, he's reallocated some professional services money to keep him on for the year to help because we're now one-to-one with student devices and with staff devices. It's an incredible amount of work to keep all of those things running and making sure that students have access to the information and staff have access to the information. So in this budget, increasing that part-time position to a full-time, which is an increase of a 0.65 FTE. It will be an IT assistant, which would help kind of do the same types of things that our summer interns do, but throughout the year. The other piece that we've done is we've shifted all software that used to be in Jason's budget. We've kind of pushed some of that back to the building budgets, but Jason still oversees all of it so that we can make sure that we have compliance with House Bill 1612, which requires student information privacy requirements. And then he has introduced this year a replacement cycle for some of our tech equipment so that we don't wind up having a big expenditure in 1 year. If you recall, when COVID hit, we used some ESSER funds and different monies to get to one-to-one, but all of those are going to age at the same time. So what we're trying to do is be thoughtful, keeping in mind that a level expenditure is easier on the tax rate. We'd like to try and plan out a cycle so that we constantly are budgeting a little bit as part of our regular budget so we don't have those big fluctuations as we refresh our technology equipment. And debt service, that that is dictated on page 34, 35, and 36 by our debt schedule that was voted and appropriated by the voters a few years ago as part of the renovation. And I think that brings us to the end of our book.
Any questions so far? Okay, then in that case, I think is that my copy or is that your copy? Okay, great. I did want, oh, I'm sorry, I take that back. I do have my copy with me. Here you go. I did want to just close with just some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time, just to make sure that we covered those. One of the questions that was asked was, looking at the enrollment data, there's some disparities from class to class. The example given was, if you look at grade 2 in 2020, there were 87 kids. That same grade, when they were in grade 3 the next year, there were 86. When they became grade 4 students in 22, it dropped to 76. Can I give an explanation for what might cause those kind of things? And I do think I kind of hedged at that earlier. I mean, clearly there is an overall enrollment decline in public schools across the region, so that is certainly part of it. But I also think that there are families are making more choices. Pandemic, there's a much higher percentage of families choosing to homeschool. We have 50 kids homeschooling. And there are more charter school options, so families are making that choice. And then private school is another alternative, and currently we have 6 kids from Newmarket there. So while I can't speak specifically to any particular grade level, if you're seeing some of that sort of attrition over time, it's because families are making choices about what they want for their kids. And I do think, you know, at a statewide basis, as we talk about education trends, choice in education is really where things are headed, and I think the more we work to provide for those choices, the more students will stay within our system. So that was one question. Another question was related to the pre-K and K enrollments. I'm wondering if those numbers are up this year, why are we seeing a declining trend down the road in later years? Because clearly, if you look at like kindergarten, we're looking at the potential of 80 kids in kindergarten in the fall, but the overall total of elementary school students is projected to be down pretty substantially. And what might cause that? Pre-K, it's important you understand that pre-K, the projections are really, it's not a projection basis thing. We basically have it's a special education program that we basically provide students who are preschool aged that need special education services. Whatever slots we have available, we make available for what we call mentor students that are non special needs students to be a part of the program. But that number is pretty consistently going to be in the 36 to 40 range, just because that's the capacity that our program has to absorb it. So short of expanding staff, that number is probably not going to go up. And actually, I was looking at the projection from NESDEC on the total number of births of kids in the 2 years that are reflected in the 2 pre-K years, you know, age 3 and 4. There's about 175 kids that have been born in that window, and only 40 of them are reflected in our pre-K numbers. So clearly that's not something you can use particularly well to project. So that is anomalous in its own way. Kindergarten, as I said earlier, when it comes to projecting, it's one of the most difficult things to do. In New Hampshire, it's not mandatory that your kid be in school until October 1 when they turn 6, and that's first grade. So it's not required by law that they be in kindergarten. So it is a little bit of a crapshoot. So when we look at the births in the community, it's like, wow, there are 91 kids born in that year that ought to show up in our schools. How many of those families are going to make the choice to enroll them? And there does seem to be sort of this up and down trajectory there. Do you want to talk about the third question?
Sure. There was a question about whether we competitively bid health insurance programs. As we mentioned, we had quite a significant increase this year. The answer to that is yes. This past year, we competitively bid our ancillary insurance, which is our long-term disability, our life. And we formed a committee in 23-24 to start looking at our health insurance. As you know, we have two collectively bargained units. We have teachers and we have support professionals. And they have both written in specifics of the current health plans that we have. So we're hoping this committee work will involve parties from both groups. We likely won't be able to make a change until outside of bargaining unless we wait until the teachers' union contract is up, but we could try and, anything in the meantime, we would need to renegotiate and open bargaining to make that happen. But yes, it is on our radar. We do have that planned for this coming year. Yep. Okay. The next question was, over the past 4 years with inflation at around 2%, the tuition per student grew from 18,400 to 27,000. I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, or an annual increase of more than 9%. With higher inflation in the future, what is the projection for 25, 26, 27? Is this trend sustainable? Projections are out that far for all the reasons we talked about earlier. With the revenues are really really challenging. The cost of education per student, of course, is funded in part on revenues that we receive to offset what we have to pay, and from the tax impact. So we have seen a gradual decline that Mr. Allen talked about. And one of the things that's challenging is, even if we have like a 25 student decline, most likely those students are spread across our demographic. So it might be, in truth and reality, 1 to 2 students per class, not really enough to remove an entire teacher. So we're in the process of doing that analysis. We're kind of looking at it as we go forward. There will come a place where you have that economy of a step down where you will be able to reduce. But at this point and in this budget, the reductions have not come in one particular tranche where other than the areas that we felt we could do through attrition. So was the next one me too? Given the preceding question and the fact that state aid to education has a decrease of 3% per year, same question about sustainability. And I think Mr. Allen spoke to this earlier. We're using that as a means to reevaluate all of our programming as part of NEASC and our middle school program. So as we move forward, we will be definitely looking to continue with robust educational offerings in a cost-effective way, with staffing as a primary consideration of that driver. The high school budget, the next question was about the high school budget. The cost of the tuition line is increasing, and I think we talked about this. $60,000 of that is actually not an increase, it's a shift from the middle level to the high school. Overall, and it doesn't show in this budget report, but when we talk about special education, we group things like the psychologists, speech and language, the different areas, the special ed transportation, all together. And when we group all those together and look at those in the district, the actual increase of those 5 cost centers is only 3.56%. It looks magnified here because we're breaking them apart from one another in different ways. Ms. McNeil does a fantastic job of containing costs in areas that she can. The SPED tuition increased by $144,000, but that's all 3 levels. So what you're seeing in the high school is offset by a decrease elsewhere. And then it's also important to note that we do get special ed education aid every year from the state. They do an estimate. It used to be called catastrophic aid. They've changed the name of it. And it's based on when we have to spend more than a certain threshold per student, they'll allow us to recoup a certain amount of the expenditures as a percentage. It's not a set percentage, and it varies year to year based on what the entire bucket of return is. But we are estimating that with this budget, where we're also projecting those tuition increases, we're expecting in the neighborhood of $300,000 in special ed revenues, which will not be reflected on the expenditure side. That's in our revenues projection. So that would sort of be an offset, or at least a partial offset of some of these increases. And then I think the last one is the universal assessment.
See, let me ask this question. I'm not sure I heard you correctly when it comes to the special education the funding from the state. Are you saying they estimate what they're going to give you for this year, and then you tell them what you spent, and then they supplement it the next year?
That's a really good question. So actually, what we get in special education, we're projecting in this year is actually from 21-22. It's a year behind. So what you do is you expend all of your budget on these, and there are certain students that you go over the threshold of what they consider is the norm, and then based on their formula, you submit. It's a great deal of work that Erica and her team do, but we submit invoices to the state to say, here's what we spent over and above. They then take it and they calculate out, they'll say, well, yes, this counts, no, this doesn't, and then they'll give you a percentage of the total that you've submitted as the cost back as revenue. So we get an estimate. We just got one earlier this fall, and for example, they said, you have submitted, this is for for the year that just ended, we've submitted $524,000 of receipts, basically. Of that amount, we estimate that we get about 72% back, because they don't approve all of them, and they also don't give the full percentage back. So it's like the adequacy aid. It's a little bit of a rough estimate, but we do estimate about 300,000 that will be offsetting the budget that's before you tonight.
It takes you 2 years to get it back.
Yeah, but we do get it every year, so it's just a year behind, a little lag factor. It comes. Okay.
And then the last question that was submitted was referencing, we talk a lot in our report about universal assessment tools that we use with our multi-tiered systems of support. And just for clarity, universal assessments are basically assessments that you use with all kids. And so really there are two universal assessments that we as a district use. One is the state required SAS testing that is done every spring, typically between March and June. We do that, and every year we get that data. I actually have a copy of a couple reports which I'll hand out to you. I'm not going to read it all to you because I know we're all tired, but if for people who want to take a look at what our data has been in recent years, well, that one, yeah, there's 2 pages. This should be, did you give them both? Yeah, there's that right there.
This one,
yeah. So there's two documents. One is a report that Patty Wands pulled together for me for just this fall's assessment data, so you can see how our kids are doing right now. And then the other one is a report that was done to the board last April, which is comparing winter results of our assessment, but it gives you an idea of how our kids are doing. Bottom line, the state assessment, which is the SAS, given that we've had a pandemic and in 2000 nobody took it, in 2021 only people who wanted to take it took it. Really, 2022 data for that is just a baseline year, so we're starting over again, so there's not a lot to compare it to. The NEWA, the NWEA, which is what we do locally, that's really the test that we use in our multi-tiered systems of support, and we look at data on individual students as well as grade levels and aggregates. And the idea is to use that information to better able to support kids. If anybody who has a desire to learn more about that, Patty Wands actually will be doing a presentation to our board in the near future to kind of summarize all of that data and talking about like how we use it and so forth. Bottom line though is we are doing consistent NEWA assessment. Our kids are performing fairly well. I think the pandemic has definitely had an impact on things, and so we're working to try to fill those gaps. But those 2 documents kind of give you the baseline data of that. So with all that being said, I know I've talked a lot, and I know everybody's tired, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
I have one question. The actual proposed budget, going back to page 9 on the document, $1,952,000, is that the proposed budget?
Hold on a second, let me get to the right page.
Page 9.
We have page 9 right there. What is?
25,952,112.
Yes. Yes,
That
is
is the
correct.
proposed budget. Do we have a default budget number yet?
I do, but I will be presenting that on Thursday to the school presented to them first. So we will get that to you as soon as we can. I know you don't have another meeting coming up, but as soon as we've presented to the board, we can send it to you digitally.
And you
Okay.
did do a back of the napkin spitball estimate at the board last week.
Yeah, and I don't have it in front of me, but
That's okay. I mean, if we can get it once
Okay.
you've actually established it,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Yeah, but it, yeah,
it
we,
comes in lower than our proposed, but it's higher than last year's because of the teacher's contract.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
any other questions? Yes.
I know, this is my fourth year on the budget committee, and this is the best presentation we've seen from anyone on budgets, in my opinion, in terms of clarity and amount of information, and, thank you.
Well, thank you. Jana does great work.
We're actually used to that. Yeah. I said the same thing. Jenna's been doing a great job, and she presents it well. And
Thank you, Todd, thank you, Jana, and thank you, your team.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Okay, next on the agenda, we need to, in case of snow or whatever, we need to set a second date for budget public hearing. I believe we currently have what was it? Okay, I believe we had the school set for January 9th, which I assume is a Monday.
Right, that's a Monday, yeah.
Okay, it is a Monday. So we do have to have it done by the 17th. So there's not a lot of time there. Do we want to try to go with, say, the 11th, which is a Wednesday?
this is January
January, yes,
as a backup date.
as a backup date. Do we want to do that?
That's a conflict for me, but you're not gonna get everybody.
Does the day after work better, Thursday?
Yeah, Tuesday or Thursday works. Yeah, Wednesday.
We can shoot for Tuesday, what, do we want to,
I think you'd probably be better off to skip a day. If we have to close up, if we can't do it on Monday, Tuesday maybe.
yeah, let's go for Thursday, the 12th, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
As our backup, and I'll let the school know that.
I mean, the only issue with that is we probably need that.
Oh, meeting.
I know we're, well, that,
It says
actually,
here.
we may not, because.
That might be your off week, right?
Yeah, I think it should be. Our calendar's a little off kilter. We should only meet twice in December, the 1st and the 15th. So the 29th, we're probably not meeting, which means we meet the 5th. I'll let you know quickly if I.
Okay, so let's tentatively put it down for the 12th
Yeah.
at 6:30.
Now, what about the town?
We'll discuss that, I guess, at our next meeting, probably. That finalized also.
And our next meeting is the,
Next meeting will now be the 19th.
So the 5th is out.
The 5th is out because we did get the school taken care of this evening. So yes, I believe I had that down as the next meeting. So our next meeting will be on 12/19, correct?
and that is the town.
That will be the town. And it'll be just the budget, basically. Just their proposed budget. So is everyone good with those dates?
Mike, is that that's the presentation or the hearing?
That's the presentation, because we're gonna have to also work them in. I don't know if we'll be able to do town and school on the same night.
What was that date?
For the town budget?
Yeah.
The 19th, December 19th.
Do you see any reason why we couldn't do both on the same night?
I mean, unless there are a lot of folks from the public who want
Right.
to.
That would be the only thing. I mean, we can attempt to do it and get it done in one night, but then we'll have to also verify that the town's available on that evening. And also
In-
the
in the-
rain date.
In the 4 years I've been around, we haven't had a lot of people show up for public hearing.
Public hearing, no.
No.
Deliberative session, yes,
Yeah.
but public
Yeah,
hearing,
deliberative, yes.
right.
But not the public hearing. I wonder if we couldn't do that.
We can certainly try to do it. I mean,
Yeah,
if the
so
town's,
You'd have to
the
set.
town
some
will
time.
work on it with us, we can certainly do it.
We can discuss that with the town on the
Yeah,
19th.
at our next meeting on the 19th, yes. Any other questions? Okay, so we've got those taken care of. Now we have the approval of our meeting minutes for the October 24th meeting. Do I have a motion to accept them?
I have just a couple items.
Okay, let's get them, can we get a motion?
Yeah,
Okay,
okay, motion, sure.
motion is, okay, motion by
Okay, discussion.
Chris and second by Roger, okay?
Yeah. All right, so, on the line item 92, it says, this is the council budget workshop, Saturday, November 29th, is that correct? Okay, so on the, going back to the minutes from the last meeting, it says here on line item 92 that Mr. Ward stated that the town council budget workshop is scheduled for Saturday, November 29th, 2022. That date doesn't
That's
exist.
Tuesday.
I have you one obvious problem with that.
So I just want to make sure we get it correct.
So you said December 21st?
No, November 29th.
November
Saturday,
29th, so
November
what's in the
29th.
minutes?
It was held 4 weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so we gotta get the date right.
Probably October.
Okay, well, that's, I just read that, it's like that date doesn't exist, so Saturday, November 29th.
October 29th.
October
October
29th.
It was on Saturday, it was
Okay.
on
Okay.
Saturday, that's why
So
I was
it should
wrong.
be October.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna have her amended to October 29th. Okay, got it. All right, and then line 115 says that you had adjourned the meeting, and since you weren't here, I guess that's not correct. So Vice Chairman Wolf had adjourned the meeting.
Okay. Any other changes or corrections? All right, all those in favor of accepting those minutes as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I will abstain since I was not here that evening. Other business, do we have anything that needs to be discussed this evening? No? Okay. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, signify.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, gentlemen.